Half a day, you're watching Coffee with the Candidates in the beautiful restaurant in Mezcala here in Agana. And I'm Tony Lamerna, your host of for the Coffee with the Candidates, and also host of Tony Talks on K57. Our candidate today is Vince Borja.
That's
How are you
correct.
doing, Vince?
I'm doing good. How are you, Tony?
How's the campaign going?
It's getting busy, or it's been busy,
yeah.
and so we're down to the last 4 weeks. So it's crunch time. You know, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of fundraisers, a lot of just individual campaign events, and then the going out canvassing this weekend in a lot of the village.
So,
meetings.
tell the listeners, I mean, they may not know who you are, but so tell the listeners who you are. Who's Vince Borja?
Well, so my name is Vince Borja. I'm a Republican, number 3 on the Republican side of the ballot. I was born and raised here on Guam. I grew up primarily in my elementary days in Backroad, Mingilao, and then after Typhoon Paka, we lost our home to the typhoon, and so there's the homes in Estumbo, Sagali Nazan, the dollar homes. We moved there, which is where I grew up as a teenager. My dad, my grandmother primarily raised me up. I lost my father when I was like 17 or 18. My mom's an immigrant from the Philippines. I graduated from GW. I joined the military, got out of the military, came home. I went and got my degree at the University of Guam School of Business, and went on to get my master's in business and leadership. I've worked in corporate America. I've worked for nonprofits. I've taught at GDOE for a little bit. I was a professor at the University of Guam for business. And then I also do some work at AK right now as a distribution manager.
So, I mean, everyone who's
Oh, and I'm a small business owner. I always forget to highlight that because I do that on the part-time.
Okay. I respect everyone who makes the decision to run because it's really a lot of work, and your life is an open book. So tell us, what's your reason for running?
There's a lot of things. I mean, obviously, I came from a very poor family. And for me, when I graduated from high school, it was a tough decision at that time. Lost my dad to drugs. And so it was either join the military or stay on Guam and work multiple jobs to help my grandmother raise my siblings. He left behind, there's 8 of us, eight boys. I'm the oldest. So being the oldest, I felt it was my responsibility to figure out, okay, how can I do my part to help my grandma take care of my brothers? The military was definitely not my first choice. I grew up with no structure, right? So for me, I was scared. But I joined the military, and I think that was the best decision I made because it gave me an opportunity to go travel, see the world. It gave me an education. But doing all of that and then wanting to come back home, one, to obviously help my grandmother, my brothers who were already in middle school and high school, kind of take them from her. She was already old, and help raise my brothers. And then, I went to UOG, and then I started to realize, living in the States and coming back, I felt like we were going backwards. I felt like I was going backwards versus moving forward in regards to just the day-to-day life, right? Living in the States for a long time, living in Europe, coming home, and just the way we do government. And it was frustrating, even at the university, just to get Pell Grant and to get my loans, it's still all manual. So that was frustrating. And then, of course, doing all the education stuff and then working at the University of Guam, I realized that it was still a struggle just as an adult now and starting a family, that things were tough and times were tough. And watching the legislature at the time, just the things that they were entertaining, are all these other things that are important, like, energy and all these other departments that were pushing money to, are those important? Yes. But I think when I think of government, there are basic services that we need to provide. And if we can't be good at providing the core services that the government should be providing, then we need to refocus. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here because we have kids, and we know a lot of people that leave Guam, right? And have been leaving Guam. And for me, I came home. I don't want to leave Guam. We want our kids to stay home, and we want our kids to live on Guam, and we want our kids to be a part of Guam. And if we don't change the direction we're heading now in regards to how we govern and how we support our economy and the businesses and how we fight crime and how we address the drug pandemic, then I think our kids are going to want to leave as well. It's going to create bigger problems if we don't address it now. So that's why I'm running for senator.
And is there any particular platform? Some candidates have a particular issue that they want to tackle when they get elected. Do you have one?
I think I'm preaching to the choir or I'm not going to say it's a dead horse when I say crime. I think crime is important because when you look at a lot of the other issues, You look at how it affects the businesses. You look at how it affects the homes, right? Because when you look at crime, you look at drugs. You're looking at like the the assaults. I mean, that's a crime as well. But so addressing crime is a big thing, and to address that, we need to look at why people resort to crime. It's drugs. When you look at, and then you get into like the socioeconomic status of a lot of most of the people in our community. How do we address that? How do we help people get out of poverty? Is we look at the economy. So that's the next thing we need to look at is the economy. We need to strengthen the economy. I think with a strong economy, people are going to be more engaged. People will have jobs. People will want to be a part of it, right? And less likely turn to drugs and less likely turn to crime. And then the other thing is, I come from my wife is a school counselor. She's also a social worker. So she works in the public school system. I also worked in the school system as well. Her sisters and her moms are educators. And if it's one thing I think that is very clear, that I think that our teachers are under-resourced and the support staff is under-resourced. The buildings, period. If you look at maintaining the buildings, look at, now we get into the classrooms, like how do teachers have the tools and resources? 99% of the teachers I know buy everything they need to create a learning environment, right? Like, yeah, they have the education, they have the books, I think, but it's the other things that make things engaging, right? It's like in a job, right? Most people who have worked in a job, like you can have a great company and a great business plan, but if you don't have an engaging culture, then nobody's going to be present, right? Meaning there, and it's the same thing with students. So teachers put a lot of their hard-earned money, luckily they got the raise this year, but put a lot of their hard-earned money into just getting the basic supplies. My wife, she deals with the PBIS, which deals with the incentive program for students, right? And she has to go and buy, rewards and print certificates with her own money because GDOE doesn't pay for color. That's pretty sad. When you look at the amount of money that they spend in the community for other things, I'm not taking away from the great graduations that they had last year for the seniors, and that was great, right? But that does not amount to the thousands of, I would probably say hundreds of thousands of dollars teachers pay every year out of their pocket to keep things going within the school, to keep students engaged. I think when we look at like kids that are neglected or kids that, I could say that I was one of those kids that grew up in a family where really there wasn't any structure, and it was those teachers that really went the extra mile to be that mentor, to be that extra parent. I was a naughty kid, and if it wasn't for the teachers that really cared and recognized that, hey, there's hope in this kid, that maybe if I just gave him my ear and just showed that I cared. And I think that's where a lot of these teachers, that's a struggle, right? They're more focused on like the mental health or the emotional well-being of the student versus really academics. And that's sad because that really depicts the way our society is today, that teachers, public school teachers especially, they have to pay attention more to that, because when you look at like crime, right, people in the news, those are people that I went to school with, most of them. And, either at JFK or GW, we all kind of came from the same home, right? Same kind of home, right? We, social programs, our parents, either working jobs. My dad was on drugs, so a lot of people in my family were on drugs, and it was just, but for me, I'm just grateful to have broken that cycle. So I know that there's opportunity out there. I know that there's ways that, and it really is just the society that we culture and the society that we built for our children to live in, and that's the responsibility of the government.
Yeah, it's interesting how, when you're mentioning about crime, most candidates I interview, when they say crime, they immediately beef up the police and make the laws harsher. Whereas you come around and say, education, improve the economy so that they can get a skill and become productive individuals in society, and then grow the economy so jobs can be available for them. And hopefully, so you've got a whole different twist to it, rather than just beefing up the police department and making the crimes much harsher.
Yeah, because I think of it as like, even like as a manager or leader, right? Like they think, oh, give a person more money, and they're going to work harder, going to be better. That's never really the case, right? You look at like, what is it that makes them the best person, or and it's usually like and sadly that's crazy. It's just that's just the world we live in today. Is really, what are we doing? Like, instead of like, you can put 1,000 police officers on the street today. That's not going to make the drugs go away. It's not going to give people jobs or better paying jobs. It's not going to give them a job that's going to help them, you know, a living wage.
Give
to
them
be-
an alternative, right? I mean, rather than going to drugs, give them alternative.
Yes.
Okay, so what's your first bill going to be? You know, you get elected. What's your first bill going to be?
So one of the ideas I had was called the Teachers Rise Act. The idea behind that is because a lot of people say, okay, give GDOE more money, right? And then it goes to the board, and then the board decides where all that money goes.
Right.
So I think with this bill, it would create kind of like a stipend, right? Or even like, you know, they talked about like the debit programs from the federal funds, is that create a stipend that teachers will get, you know, and it's its own program and its own fund, obviously managed by GDOE, but it's not part of like the GDOE budget.
So they would be able to buy supplies that are
supplies
needed
and things that
rather
are
than out
needed.
of their
Yes,
pocket.
yes, and I think that will help address one, obviously the under-resourced educators, and then you know, again, teachers are happy, students are going to be happy. It's like employees, right? You take care of the teacher, you know, you take care of the employees, the customers are going to be happy, and the teachers are.
I tell you what, you know, since the pandemic, parents are realizing the hard work teachers do. Right?
Yeah, you know, my short stint at Simon Sanchez, and I was just teaching online. Man, it was like being a social worker. I spent more of my time calling parents and students and trying to get them to come to class.
Yeah.
You know, and it's sad when like you call a parent and the parent, you know, the child's a ninth grader, and you're like, can I speak to the parents of blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, you're calling about my son? He's not here right now. You know, can you call back later?
Anyway, Vince, you know, real quickly, why should the people of Guam vote for you?
Well, I'm here today because like most in the community, I'm frustrated. Most of the community, I understand the struggles. I understand, you know, just the day-to-day life and what it takes to survive in Guam, and it's very sad. But I'm not just here for me. I'm not here from my wife. I'm here because of our kids. I'm here because of your children, and I think that, you know, I come from a diverse background of experience, whether it be in education and business, the military, and I think that it's time to move Guam in a different direction.
All right, real quick, last segment. Johnny Sablan or Flor Bazaquan?
My dad loved Johnny Sablan.
Okay. Chicken or shrimp Kelligman?
Chicken Kelligman.
Okay. Spare ribs or short ribs?
Short ribs.
Empanada or butsi butsi?
Ooh, it depends who makes the empanada.
All right, you've been watching Vince Borja, and we hope you enjoyed this segment.